Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on which part of the world you're actually watching us from. You're welcome to be part of this analysis that we'll be conducting in a moment. I'll personally take you through the Zambia's economic journey from 2001 to 2019. I must hasten to mention that the data that we are actually using is coming from World Bank. It hasn't been diluted. It is as is. I'm representing a consultants firm as a founder member. This consultants firm has done a lot of good work in Zambia. We have had a lot of goodwill from most of the companies in manufacturing, mining, health, financial services, and we're so grateful to all the networks that have helped us to grow as a consultants firm. Like I've already said, we'll be taking you through the Zambia's economic journey. My name is Kapepe Kapepe, or Fitzpatrick Kapepe. Okay, you have an option. You can call me anything. So we'll first look at the GDP, Zambia's GDP. How has it been growing from 2001? So this particular range that I've picked, it focuses on the 4 former presidents we've had in this country. That is President Mwanawasa, President Rupia Banda, President Sata, and finally, President Longo. But there will be certain fundamental questions from this analysis that will be forced or compelled to respond to. Like, does the growth in debt, does it expand your productive capacities and affect your GDP positively? Obviously, assumptions, practical assumptions, yes, the assumption, but practical assumptions that when you borrow, you apply those borrowings to active assets. These are assets that will be able to generate more revenues or income for you or value. So let's look at the GDP. So take note on some few timelines that I'll share with you. Around 2001, President Mwanawasa takes over the instruments of power from President Chiluba. And at the time that he was taking over, Zambia had unmanageable debt, I think, and there was need for Zambia to be forgiven, and obviously subscribed itself to the highly indebted poor countries, which was called HIPIC. And up to date, I'm still, even when I was still young, I was so amazed why we celebrated for having reached the HIPIC completion point. But here's the reason why people celebrated. So look at where the GDP was then, about $4 billion. By the time President Mwanawasa was dying, GDP rose to 18 billion. Let it sink in, from 4 billion to $18 billion. Unfortunately, in 2008, President Manasseh dies. And President Banda, Rukia Banda, is ushered in and now has the instruments of economic power, both economic and political power. But he actually got his presidents at what I would say maybe the most defining period or wrong period. At that point, around 2008 August, global recession sets in. You have AIG company, Lehman Brothers, and all these other companies folding up and going under. The financial sector went under. Almost literally, almost every sector was affected. And at least this is documented. In Africa, there were 2 countries that managed to float during the crisis. It was Zambia and Ghana. So this is why we are seeing this dip. It's because of the recession. Then the economy takes an upward trajectory, or what some people in Uganda will say, by 2011, I don't know which exact month, in 2011, President Banda loses presidential elections to Michael Chilufya-Sata. And the economy continues growing from $23.5 billion to, at the time he was dying, to 27. But then, I think Mr. Sata died in 2015. Yes, in 2015, if not 2014, but in 2015. You can Google. Sometimes I hate Googling. Then President Lungu takes over the instruments of power. But also remember that he took over the instruments of power at a very awkward period. At that point, the whole part of Southern Africa was hit by serious drought. Then we had massive load shedding that would even go to maybe an average of 8 hours per day. What it meant was the country had to force the economy to sleep for 8 hours plus. The industry it was on oxygen, on ventilators, no energy. So it became very chaotic. And this is why you see this stagnation. We should be thankful we pulled through. We pulled through. By 2019, the GDP was at $23.3 billion. At that point, we cannot accuse or apportion blame to COVID. That is when we're just hearing about COVID around December somewhere there in China. I think the first case in Zambia, it should have been March or May. But obviously because of COVID to 2020, GDP reduced from 23.3 to 19 billion. Let's check on revenue. So even revenue took the same GDP shape. This, where there was a dip, you could see, as well there was a dip the other side. It took the same shape. But then the question that this analysis is going to answer is, does GDP expand revenue? Because if we are able to expand this revenue, this is the revenue that is supposed to pay debt. But from the loop of things is that revenue remained almost the same and it started going under. Whereas the debt was exponentially increasing. But around 2011 to about at the time that Mr. Rupia Banda was living, look at the debt levels, and started rising. So from 2011, it was just about $1.5 billion to $15.2 billion. Might also include the external debt. I think that is what the World Bank is saying. So we expect that this debt, in a normal situation, it was used to create assets that helped in expanding the revenues, thereby expanding the GDP and be able to pay. Because why we need these revenues, guys, is this is where we are going to extract cash available for debt service to cover this debt. Now, let's see, in terms of the revenue, you see, so this revenue, it was much, much lower than the debt, starting from 2016 somewhere there. So if we say maybe 1/3 of this debt, okay, let's say 1/5, because most of these loans were 5 to 10 years. So 1/5 of the debt is supposed to be amortized or paid from your revenue, which is 1/10 of your revenue. Is it? No, not 1/10, maybe 1/5 of your revenue. Because remember that 50% of the revenues that the country was generating, it was going to emoluments, and 40% was going to debt service, leaving about 10% for OPEX. So this created a problem. And when you look at this picture before you bring in the GDP, it may clearly justify why the previous government decided to seek for immediate solution from the IMF, of which the current government also realized that possibly that was the best way to go to it. We all know, as students of finance, we know that if the IMF is not coming in how do I put it so that I sound sober? It's just coming in for credibility purposes. The aim is to restructure these blue lines, spread them even for 10 years so that these bars could even be lower. If you check where we're coming from, revenue was higher than debt. And this is what maybe is expected, that debt servicing should be lower than the cash available for debt service, so that at any given time, we will not risk breaching any contracts, because at that point we would have sculpted our debt properly. So going to IMF, and this is my view, is to actually seek for that credibility, give assurances to the lenders that you'll be in a position to pay, but only if the debt is restructured in such a manner that your cash available for debt service is higher than your debt servicing obligations. Thank you so much, and I hope you liked this presentation. Visit our YouTube account, or just hire Roy Consult to come and train you in your organization. We are doing that so many organizations. For KCM, we on record, we trained over 2,000 employees this year and the last part of 2020. So we are also that credible. Thank you so much, and